Hey Beacon, welcome home to your Bounce Back Blueprint Community Podcast, where you are challenged to be, do, and have God's best as you thrive on your journey from setback to success. I'm your Bounce Back guide, Tiffany Huff Struthers, and I'll be guiding you on the journey by sharing tips, tools, and the tea on how I was able to bounce back from escaping death, healing from heartbreak, and finding hope in homelessness. And then I wrote an award-winning book all about it. And shout out to God, ever since I was courageous enough to share my story, my life and the lives of women around the world have been forever changed. And as a member of the Bounce Back Blueprint community, I'm called to teach you to do the same. So grab your journal and let's build this blueprint. Hey Beacon, hey, before we get into building the blueprint this week, I wanted to let you know that this week's episode is being brought to you by Coffee and Clarity, Purpose Over Pandemics. In case you're new around here and you're not familiar with Coffee and Clarity, let me give you the tea. Coffee and Clarity is a mini retreat and is a transformational experience to equip, challenge, and encourage you on your journey as you rebuild your life with God first. In this sacred space, you will grow your faith, friendships, and fellowship with divine connections, deep conversation, and intentional intimacy. You'll leave the experience transformed, having had an encounter with God, and with clarity for your calling, courageous conversations, and covenant connections with like-minded women. Plus, you'll have immediately actionable steps to move forward with for your personal mission and journey from setback to impact and income. You can grab your seat and RSVP with the link in the show notes. Now, let me introduce you to Candance Greene, who was our guest for this week's Rewind episode, Aggressively Seeking Peace. Candance L. Greene is a published writer, podcaster, and the founder of Cherishedflight, a ministry dedicated to helping women realign with the peace of God. She has produced over 100 episodes of her podcast where she shares biblical steps women can take to implement the peace of God in their lives on a daily basis. Through Cherishedflight.com, Candance shares a series of blogs on topics ranging from abiding with God to forgiveness. She's also conducted sets of blog series on the fruit of the Spirit and praying the names of God. Candance is known for introducing the concept of peace breaks for women who are overwhelmed by the demands of marriage, motherhood, and maintaining their careers. With the peace breaks, Candance encourages women to step away from what they are doing to carve out moments in their day to pray and breathe to decrease stress and reconnect with the presence of God. She has conducted live peace break sessions with multiple audiences, as well as on weekly episodes of Cherishedflight the Podcast, and now she's even doing them live on Instagram to help you through this pandemic. In 2018, she released her book, Inhale Peace, a 31-day journey to realign with the peace of God. And she also launched Inhale Peace Journey Through the Devotional, a video series that walks her Peace Collective through each day of the devotional. And now, without further ado, I am super excited to share with you Aggressively Seeking Peace with Candance Greene. So you ladies are in for a real treat. We have the phenomenal Mrs. Candance Greene with us today. And while her professional bio is available in the show notes, I think that she herself can take us beyond the bio. So Candance, tell our listeners, who is Candance Greene?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me. I am super excited about being on your podcast, but also being a part of this wonderful conference that is going to take place in October. So thank you.
I'm so grateful to have you.
And who is Candance? So many of you may know me as Cherishedflight on social media. And I am a mother of three, a wife, and a woman who spent too many years being overwhelmed by just life and motherhood and career and all the responsibilities that come with all of those things, and trying to figure out what in the world am I supposed to be doing. And I started Cherishedflight just as kind of like an oasis in the middle of all of that, of peace, and really letting women know that the peace of God is available to them and for them. All they have to do is just ask for it to access it. Because at some point in my life, I didn't think that peace was something that I had access to. And once I learned that, reading the scriptures and learned that, it just really changed a lot for me. And I said, well, if I didn't know it, other people don't. And
Mm.
so that's where it all comes from with Cherishedflight and the inhale peace. Peace breaks, all of that comes from that understanding that we all have access to the peace of God.
So, would you consider yourself an oasis of peace now?
Much more than I used to be. Oh my goodness, my 20s and 30s, crazy times. Not crazy like I was not an out there partier type of person, but I mean like internally, I
Mm.
was not at peace. And it took me a minute to find that balance. And I'm not saying I'm perfect now, that I'm, this Zen person now, but I do know that I have access to the peace of God, and that it is not something that is a passive action, maintaining that peace, and because you have to actively seek it constantly.
I
And
love
so,
I love that you always remind me, and I know it's not just for me, but I love that you always remind me that it is not an act of, and is not a passive act.
right, it's an act of aggression because you're going after it.
On social media, it's always for me. I mean, other people might have access, but it's for me.
Yeah. And you know what, and I'm glad you said that, because sometimes you feel like you're in a silo when you're in on social media and you're posting things, but I know that people think being peaceful is just, something placid, something very, very passive. It is not, because this world is crazy. You can't even look at the news for 5 minutes to see what's going on in Washington, D.C., what may be going on in your city, what's going on in schools, what's going on in your homes. And in order just to maintain that center, you got to go after it and say, you know what, I am choosing peace over all of the chaos. And
Mm.
that takes some training.
Yeah,
You have to train your mind and train your thoughts and train how you speak in order to keep that rhythm, that rhythm of peace.
so we're going to get into that a little bit more as we
Mm-hmm.
move forward, but I'm glad you planted the seed early on so that our listeners are ready and preparing for what is to come. So like you said, you are going to be taking the stage at She Thrives this fall. Super excited to have you. And so I want to know what attracted you to becoming a speaker for the She Thrives experience.
Well, first of all, for your listeners, we met at an event. Has it been over a year now?
Oh
A
yeah,
year and a half?
2 years.
2 years ago? Wow. Okay, so we just happened to meet at this particular event that took place in Baltimore. Um, and it was kind of like a networking event for women. But it really opened the door for me because that's the first time I'd ever done any kind of speaking anything
Wow.
at that event. And so we kept in touch on social media. Follow you, you follow me. I listen to your podcast,
Like,
and and we just kind of give each other encouragement, back and forth. And then when I saw you post, I said, I love what you're doing. And what really resonated with me at the event where we met was how um, confidently you spoke about God and your relationship with God there. Um, and a lot of people in an environment that may not be that may be kind of secular, they're kind of hesitant about speaking about their relationship with God, but you're like, whatever, I'm talking about this. And I love that. I love that so much. And so when I saw that you put that out there, you were looking for speakers, I said, I have to do this. I have to do this. And hopefully, this is something that, what I would like to present is something that she would want as part of the lineup. But I really like that women of God who are not afraid to speak about their relationship with God and how transformative that relationship is.
Wow. Now I told you to get your tissues. Now I need tissues. I want to thank you for even sharing that with me, because as I'm sure you know, it's a challenge. Mm-hmm. And I have struggled with said challenge. Without getting too far off track, I left my job in 2014, and because God told me, right? And I was already doing work with women. I was doing workshops. I was doing the thing. And so when I left, I expected that I would continue to do the thing. But as I progressed on the quote unquote entrepreneurial journey, I felt more and more that what I was to do, though it was business, it was ministry. And I kept trying to dance around it. I kept saying, well, God is in me. So no matter where I go, God is there, but I felt this consistent need to lead that.
Yeah.
And it's very challenging to reconcile that, right? Because it's like, okay, but this is a business. You don't want to turn people off. You don't want people to think they can't work with you. But, when you are who you are, you have to just be who you are.
Yes.
And it got to the point where it was too much of a battle for me to not be who I was.
Mm-hmm.
The expense that battle was costing me was way more than any lost potential client would have been. And so even then, 2 years ago, I was really still struggling and trying to reconcile that. So the fact that you saw and heard beyond my struggle,
wow,
that really means a lot. So thank you for sharing that.
And you know what? It was not even, the way you spoke about God was so matter of fact. Like it was already coming out of you.
Mm-hmm.
It was already coming out of you there. And so it was like, I said to myself, okay, she is confidently speaking about this. Then what is stopping me from doing it?
Wow.
So you just never know, right? When you're on your journey, how you could be in the middle of just a storm or a pit or a valley, and you're still doing what God is telling you to do. God still uses you as a vehicle and a vessel to encourage someone else. So that's what you did.
Wow. Thank you. No. And I think, just to, and I will come back to this, but even like you said, that seeking peace is an act of aggression. That was me exercising my aggression because I needed to speak my truth to have peace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And you did it. And now you're doing it.
Yes. So our theme for this year's She Thrives experience, as you know, is setback to impact. And so I want you to share with our listeners what has been one of the most challenging setbacks you've experienced. It doesn't have to be the worst, but what is one of the most challenging setbacks you've experienced?
I'm actually in the middle of a setback right now. I had surgery about 3 weeks ago, and my 9-to-5 is a very aggressive 9-to-5 job. And I'm on the go and on the go and on the go and on the go and on the go so much that I think that my body forced a Sabbath on me, a Sabbath rest, a time for me to sit back and rest. And so it's been 4 weeks now, 4 or 5 weeks since the surgery, I have been still. And I wouldn't say this is a setback, but it's just a repositioning of how I think. But because I was so used to going and going and going and going, I didn't know how not to go.
Mm.
And so during this period of time, it's just been adjusting to the fact that I can rest, that I need to rest, and that rest doesn't mean I'm lazy. It means that my body says it's time to rest. My mind says it's time to rest, and I can't operate fully in the purpose that God has for me if I am exhausted. And that's where I was coming from, actually living and working and trying to operate exhausted. And that's part of what what I'm going to talk about there about living golden and what that means. But to actually come to a space and place where my body forced a Sabbath on me. I was reading this book that said, if you don't take Sabbath, then your Sabbath becomes an illness. Or your body will force you to sit down and stop. And when you deal with like having to have a surgery or some kind of illness, it really makes you aware of how fragile life is. But not only that, how you've been operating is not. It's just a tiny glimpse of just the whole world. Like there's a world that exists outside of your job. There's a world that exists outside of whatever you're doing day by day by day. Like I know there may be some stay-at-home moms or people who are in the classroom or whatever, but there's a world that exists outside of what you're doing. And for me to be out during the day when I was normally at work and say, oh my gosh, there's a park right there.
Mm.
Or I can actually go to this place and I can leave work like I left work today to go to an appointment and not feel guilty about leaving.
It's very interesting that when I ask this question, the responses are almost oxymoronic, right? Like, what was the setback? And while it's a setback, it's also very often an opportunity, right?
Yes,
I always
yeah.
say like opportunities often come dressed as obstacles, right? But in this case, while it was a setback for you physically, it created the space for you to make the comeback that was necessary to be and to do the things that God would have you do and have a greater appreciation for those things.
Yes, indeed.
And oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, and allowing the process to take place. Because at first I was fighting it. I was still trying to be connected to work and check emails and all still, while I'm supposed to be on break. And my mother, who's here, she was like, give me your phone. We're shutting this down.
Yes.
And you need to rest. And then once I allowed myself to rest, it was like I could feel myself physically and spiritually putting it down.
Mm.
And putting it down actually frightened me. Because I said, if I put it down, what happens if I like putting it down and don't want to pick it back up? So, and like I said, I'm still in this lane. I'm still in this zone. I'm still learning. So, but it's a different level of peace that I'm accessing right now. So
I think God was giving you an extended peace break.
yes.
Or trying to teach you about an extended peace break, right?
Yes, indeed.
So how, and I heard you say that part of your talk at the experience will be around getting your it back, right? Which is a direct correlation to how you are using this setback to make an impact. But in what other ways have you seen opportunities for this experience, this setback, to make an impact? And you've talked a little bit about how it's impacted your life, but how has it impacted the lives of those around you?
Well, it allows me to be present. because like I said, my job is very aggressive. I'm a PR person for a teachers union.
Mm.
And so, with everything happening with the schools, there's something every day.
Mm.
And so a lot of times when I'm home, I may be here physically, but with 3 children, uh, I wasn't always present. And so I think that this type of Sabbath break allows me to stop and really look at my kids and say, wow, actually enjoy um, our time together without rushing to say, oh, I got to get on this call, or I got to do this, or I got to send this email, or I got to put this press release together. No, it's just, how was school today? Tell me what's going on. Really getting to reconnect with
Yeah.
family,
And
and with my husband as well, reconnecting with my husband, because he's just as busy as I am. But I think when I slowed down, he slowed down, and he is like, oh, well, I'll come home early too.
mm,
And it's kind of helped our family to kind of reconnect a little bit.
that's so very important. I shared earlier in the year that the greatest lesson I learned in 2018, and what I'm really working to fine tune in my life now and make a lifestyle, is that I need to be famous at home first. And that means
Yeah.
I need to be famous at home in my body, right? That's my home. I need to be famous at home in my relationship with God, and I need to be famous at home with my husband and my children. And
Mm.
unfortunately, sometimes it does take a setback for us to get that perspective shift,
Mm-hmm.
and really focus on the fame that's most important.
Right. Mm-hmm. Because in the end, it's not all the people out there that are going to be taking care of you. It's the people in your home right now.
That's right. That's right.
As my son, I have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, and my son, who's 12. Ooh, I know I hope he doesn't hear that. Who's 12 will say, Mom, I'll take care of you when you're old. He keeps saying, I'll feed you applesauce when you're old.
Because you won't have
But
it.
but they're the ones who are gonna, take care of us, and we gotta take care of them
Right.
now and teach them. So that perspective shift has really been valuable.
So, if you had to think about it or do some reflecting on the experience, and I know, like you said, you're still in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Still adjusting and probably getting reacclimated with work and finding that balance. But what would you say were 3 keys to you being able to come out better on the other end of the experience?
I would say surrendering to
Mm.
it, and not to fight it, just surrender. And that can be one of the most difficult things to do, to let go, because you don't want to fall, you don't want to fail, you don't want to be stuck, because I was afraid I would be stuck.
Mm.
But I had to surrender to the experience. I had to trust God, because I'm here for a reason at this point, in the middle of this experience, for a reason. So I have to trust God, even though I don't know what the outcome is, even though I don't know which way he's going. God don't tell you anything. He just says step. And you're like, but I need to know where I'm going. No, you don't. You need to step.
Yes.
And so surrendering, trusting God, and really having faith that God has me. Like, I don't have to have me here. Like, has me, I mean, my best interest at heart. He
Yes.
has me in his hands, and he's not going to let me go. And so I have to have that faith that God has got this. He knows what he's doing. I'm surrendering. And I've literally had to say this to myself: just surrender, just let it go. You don't have to be in control. God is like me talking to myself through, because when I tell you I'm a control freak, I am a control freak. Like, I
Really?
have yes, I have to know what's going on. What's going on? What's the next thing? What's the next step? Surrender.
Yes.
And when God said surrender, I was like, no. No, I'm not doing that. But the more I surrender, the more I let go, the more I release, the more peace I feel. But also, I'm navigating now in an arena I've never been in before. I've never been in this place in my life before. And so I don't know. I don't know the road. I don't know the way. I have to trust God.
And how's that working out for you?
Some days I'm good. Other days I'm like, where am I? What's going on? But God keeps saying, surrender, give it to me, give it back to me. Stop trying to take the baton. You can't have this will, whatever other metaphors you want to stick in there. I got this. So just breathe through it. So a lot of those times when you see me posting about peace breaks, breathing through the moment, stop panicking, I'm talking to myself.
Yes.
Posting those things just to remind myself that God's got it. Breathe through it. It's going to be all right.
So surrender for sure.
Surrender, trust in God, and have the faith that God has me.
Having that faith. I used to always say that I would tell God, please hold. God would be calling me and I would be like, please hold or call me back. Not right now, you know. But at a recent session of Coffee and Clarity, we were talking about being redirected and how sometimes, when we are being redirected or when God is redirecting us, sometimes redirection feels like rejection, but that's not what it is. And so we have to be willing to connect with our GPS. And when I shared with them what the GPS was, it's like God's plan in scripture. Like when you get lost, when you don't know what to do, when you can't see what's coming, you have to go back to the GPS. You got to go to God. You got to be reminded of what his plan is for you. And you got to go to the scripture. And that's enough. Because when you're in the car and you put a destination in that GPS, you depend on that GPS.
Yes, you do.
Get you to where you need to go. And if you get to a dead end street or something, you 9 times out of 10, you put the address in again.
Yes.
And you trust it again, even though it misled you. So we have to be reminded of, our source and going back to that GPS.
Yes.
And I wholeheartedly agree that it is an act of surrender, and it is definitely the challenge. And as you said, I keep coming back to this because it's so true. The act of aggression of trusting God, because that too is an act of aggression. And it is, in fact, sometimes a battle for that peace, right?
Yes.
You don't have peace when you think you have control.
Right.
And for some reason, you convince yourself that you shouldn't release the control to get the peace.
Right. Yes. And you have those moments when you're like, you know what? Not only do I not trust you, God, you're not moving fast enough and you're not going in the direction I need you to go. So you give me this will back. And that's when it just totally derails. Because, you're taking the wheel and you're going somewhere he didn't want you to go. So that's why I've learned just surrender. And every time I get anxious, I have to say to myself, okay, what's the core reason why I'm feeling this way? What is making me feel this? And I have to really think and assess, and I get to, it's because of this. Okay, God. And that's what I pray about right there. That little thing right there, that's the core issue.
Yes.
Work on that, chip away at that. And then I get back, letting go of the wheel and get back in the back seat, not the passenger. I'm getting in the back seat.
So you can't see.
Yeah.
When you're in the passenger seat, you'd be like, well, why are you going that way? Why did you turn right? You going left. Yes, that's good.
And you pretending that you got your foot on the brake.
That's real. So what words of encouragement would you offer to the woman who's had, I think you said, a forced Sabbath, or the woman who's been operating out of exhaustion and is now being challenged to put things down the woman who is afraid of getting stuck, ultimately afraid to trust God, how would you encourage her if she's listening?
Well, if you are an overwhelmed woman and you are dealing with exhaustion, first of all, you have to put something down. You have to stop. And I am speaking from experience where I knew that I needed to stop and put things down. And yet I continued to keep pushing forward. I continued to work through exhaustion. And that didn't get me anywhere. It didn't. That actually led to me being stuck. And so my encouragement is this. It's okay to sit down. And it's okay to say no. It's okay to say no if it's not benefiting or leading you toward your peace or leading you toward your rest. And you don't have to do everything that everybody is sending your way. If you are in the middle of a Sabbath, a forced Sabbath, then it's time to really get still and listen to what God is saying to you. God is trying to speak to you through this experience. And I don't know what it may be for you, but God is really trying to speak to you through that. And healing comes once you open up your heart and open your mind, and really allow God to access you, your spirit. And he will tell you what you need to do next. And I know that from experience as well. Once you sit down, allow God to work with you, and to work within you. A lot of times it could be, you need to forgive someone. You need to forgive yourself. Something that you need to let go of, something that you're holding on to, a belief about yourself, or you're doing all this work because you have to be an overachiever for some reason. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why we do everything that we do.
Yes.
But if you are that overwhelmed woman who is in that space where you are at your wit's end, it's time for you to put it down. It's time for you to sit down. And doing that might be frightening, but you're going to have to, because the alternative is you're going to keep running past E and you're going to break down.
That's right. That's right. And so now we're going to bring it full circle, because where you started,
Yep.
you said that you were in a place where you didn't have inner peace. There was some inner crazy going on, right? And oftentimes that inner crazy is what leads us to work to exhaustion, to push ourselves. It's what sets us up to the point where we feel like we can't put anything down. And so we end up breaking down.
Yep.
So I want to talk about a little bit about your journey of crazy that led to the birth of Cherished Flight, and the need, or your recognition of the need for an aggressive journey toward an oasis of peace.
So when I graduated from undergrad in I'm going to date myself, 98, I moved to New York. And I was going to be this, writer living in Harlem. And I wanted to live where Langston Hughes and Zora Neale Hurston lived. But I had to, once I moved to Harlem, realize that it was 1998 and not 1920s. So it was a whole different Harlem. And basically, New York City chewed me up and spit me back out down the New Jersey Turnpike. So when I'm originally from Nashville, Tennessee. So again, I went to school in Georgia, moved home for 6 months to Nashville, and then moved to New York, Labor Day weekend, 1998. And when I was driving down the turnpike, I started thinking, what is the chaos and confusion? What is going on? I was running from a lot of childhood issues. Paternal abandonment. I was an incest survivor, and I was angry with my family, and I was really running. So when I landed in Baltimore, and with the plan of moving to Chicago after a 5-year stint here, but I met my husband here, and the rest is history.
Plan all together. from New York to Baltimore and like, oh, I'm going to Chicago. Like, I'm on the run.
Let me tell you, and I had no money. So that was part of the crazy. Really, it was an idealistic plan, but I didn't have any concrete. I didn't have any money. I didn't have, how are you going to get there? I didn't have a car.
Wow.
So I was just making up plans, and this is how I'm going to do it. And I'll just get there like I was a gypsy or something. But one night when I was in Baltimore, I'd been here a couple of months, and things were just totally crazy. I was in a dark space. I was severely overweight because I was eating all of my emotions, and I was just unhappy, but unhappy to the point of like severe depression. And I remember saying, God, I need to surrender my life to you. I need to surrender my life to you. And I said, please, can I exchange all of this just for your peace? All I want is your peace. I don't want anything else. I just want your peace. I literally laid out on the floor. I had never done this before. I'd seen my grandmother do it, but I had never laid out and prayed like that on the floor. And I just cried my eyes out. And that's when I rededicated my life to Christ. And then what God did was this. He had me to begin to pray for the person who had sexually abused me when I was a child. So at this point in my life, when I had asked God for peace, this is how he brought it to me. And when he said, I need you to pray for this person, I said to myself, or said to God, I'm not praying for this person. I mean, no. And God said, you asked me for peace. This is how I'm going to bring it to you. And so it was through forgiving and releasing that experience that God really began to show me how to actively access his peace. So all that to say, the name Cherishedflight came from me, actually, my journey to Baltimore, which I called my cherished flight. And that's where the name came from. And then Cherishedflight at one point was an editing service because I used to edit books. I used to be a ghostwriter as well. But that was not fulfilling. And when I realized one night, it was over a couple of months watching and reading people's Facebook posts on Sunday night about how much they were dreading going to work on Monday mornings. I said, somebody needs to encourage them. Someone needs to say to them, you're going to make it through Monday. Monday is just another day. People don't know that they have access to God's peace. And my husband said, why does this have to be somebody? Why can't it be you? And I said, yes. And so then I said, well, what I really want to do is a podcast, but I don't know how we're going to do that. So back in the day when my husband was in college, he was a DJ. All his records and equipment are in our basement, including podcast recording equipment.
Wow.
So he said, everything you need, and we've all heard this, everything you need, you have. It's in our basement. I will teach you how to use it. And so that's how the podcast came about. And that's when I changed my website over from my business, over from the editing service to Cherishedflight, what it is today, the oasis for the overwhelmed woman.
So I want to stop you before we get to the peace break, right? Because there are a few things there that I want to make sure our listeners grab hold of. And the first being, and I don't even know if you recognize this, but what I heard you saying is that the initial encounter that you had with seeking God's peace required an act of aggression because of what he required you to do.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Right. And so I want for the person who is struggling right now, with unrest, with heaviness, with overwhelm, if you're dealing with unforgiveness, and I have chills right now just thinking about it because, sometimes we think it's a person that we need to forgive. But if we're honest with ourselves, we need to come clean and accept that we are harboring unforgiveness toward God.
Oh, yeah. I was angry.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And then probably even more angry that he would have you to pray for said experience that you were
Yeah.
still not over, right?
Right. Yeah.
That is, I think, the prime example of the aggressive action that it takes
Mm-hmm.
to seek and continuously seek and maintain your peace.
Right. And not only that, trusting God, trusting that plan, because sometimes when God tells you to do something, it might sound crazy. Like it had never rained before when he told Noah to build this ark.
Listen.
And nobody would even understood what Noah was doing. They're like, okay, you are a fool. So, I mean, even John the Baptist walking around looking like a crazy man, talking about the Messiah coming. God tells you to do some crazy stuff, and you still have to do it regardless of what everybody else is saying to you.
And that's a whole nother word right there, is that sometimes, you have to seek and do on your own.
Yeah. Yep.
And trust that God's word and his presence is enough.
Yep.
Because it's, depending upon who your friends are. Now, some of y'all got these high and mighty friends, and I get that. But we all have a person that we could call and be like, God told me to forgive so-and-so. And they're like, don't do that. Don't forgive them, So sometimes you have to be willing to trust God and trust God and trust God, period.
And keep that to yourself.
Yes. If I've learned anything else on this journey, is that people have faith until they have to have faith.
Oh, that's
so
good.
If you aren't able to trust God for yourself and you start going to people when you need to go to God, then you will find yourself struggling
Yes.
with being and doing what he would have you do.
Right. Because they'll talk you out of it.
That's right. When he would have you do exactly what you said you did, Candance, a complete act of surrender, stretched out on the floor, willing to exchange whatever it took for that peace.
Right. Yep. That's, I think that was my rock bottom. That was my rock bottom spiritually, because I was also, surrounded by darkness. My dreams were dark. I had dreams of people, like I was telling people how to shoot me, to kill me in my dreams. And so everything around me was dark. And I said, I just need light. I need light. I need light. I need you to bring light into my life, peace into my life, love into my life, because I can't continue to live in this darkness anymore. So if you are at that point, it's time to surrender.
And then the other thing I heard you say was, the infamous everything we have is within us. But take it a step further. You said everything I needed was in the basement, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, somebody needs that reiterated, because sometimes the very things we need to do what is necessary or in the places we don't want to go.
Yeah.
Right? You think about your basement, depending upon where you live, it's dark, it's damp, it might not smell good. You might have to take a flashlight. There may or may not be a mouse or something down there if it's that kind of old funky basement. You know what I mean?
Yes.
There are some places that we don't want to go, but it's where what we need is at. And
that's where the seeds are buried.
That's right. That's right. Again, it is an act of aggression. It's like, how bad do you really want the peace?
Yep.
How bad do you really want what you're praying for?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So I just wanted to point those things out. I want to make sure people grab hold of what's being said. Because when you're in those dark places, and then somebody says you got to go somewhere darker, like the basement, it's like, really? I don't have it in me.
Yep.
You could take that one more step. If you can trust that this is where you need to go, everything could change.
And everything did change. Everything did change on both accounts. My life, my spiritual life changed. I began to Like after I surrendered with that prayer, light entered my life. That's actually maybe a year later, I met my husband, but I wasn't looking to be married at all. And we were talking, we'd met, we were talking for maybe like 2 days. And he said, I have to bring you something. He said, the Holy Spirit told me to give this to you. I'm like, okay. He gave me a candle. And he said, when things get dark, use this to light your way. Now I had prayed for light, for God to bring light into my life. And here comes this man bringing me a candle. And I was like, okay, God, now you got a whole other plan that I didn't want, but okay.
Wow.
So, once you surrender and let go, God puts some real gems in your life.
Yes. Yes. So tell us, I interrupted you as you talked about the journey to starting Cherish Flight. At what
Yes.
point when you started Cherish Flight, from the very beginning of the podcast, were you already doing the peace breaks, or was that something that grew along the way?
So the very first episode is about peace breaks.
So I'm sorry, for the listeners who aren't familiar with you, who do not know what a peace break is, please enlighten them, and then you can tell us about that first episode.
Okay. So a peace break is when you take a moment during your day, whatever time you want to do it, to reconnect with God. So what I normally do them at work. And so when I post about it, I say, leave your computer, the ringing phone, anybody that's trying to get you to go into a meeting, walk outside. Because if you stay in your office or your classroom or your home office,
Your workspace.
your workspace, something is going to distract you, something or someone. So get out of that area, go outside. And this is where you literally do your breathing exercises, where you inhale peace and you exhale your stress or your anxiety or your fear, whatever it is, so you can realign with the peace of God. Sometimes during my day, it's so stressful, I got to do more than one. But when I go out and I just take a moment to just breathe, because really breathing actually regulates your stress, your heart level. It has deep breathing exercises. It's like a physiological result that comes from taking those deep breaths in. You can actually feel your body like responding and calming down from whatever the experience is, whatever is causing you to feel anxious or stressed out or fearful. And then when you get to that point where you can hear God talking to you again and saying, okay, God, I pray during my peace break. So you pray and then you go back into doing what you were doing. You go back to your job or your workspace and continue your work. So that's what a peace break is. It's just taking that time during your day to reconnect with the peace of God. And so with the very first episode of my podcast, that's what I talk about and teach the listeners, to my Peace Collective, to walk them through a peace break. And from there, it's, the podcast talks about different things: forgiveness, how to surrender to things, letting go of fear. I try to be as transparent as possible, because I'm going through this journey with everyone else, and I don't know everything. So if I'm feeling anxious about something, I talk about it. If I've dealt with depression, I talk about it. If I'm telling myself, you know what, I have always lived my life with my eyes closed, like I'm riding a roller coaster. Sometimes you got to open your eyes and let go and look at what you're doing. Look at what God is trying to do through an experience that might be highly stressful. There are lessons you can learn. He's trying to build your strength through those experiences. So as you're going through all those things, peace breaks will help you to maintain your peace and your connection to God, because that's really where the peace comes from.
And so as if I should say, the podcast wasn't enough, the peace breaks aren't enough, and the speaking engagements that you have where you teach about peace breaks, you also wrote a book. about this journey toward peace. So
Yes.
what prompted you to do that?
So I was at my mother-in-law's house in New York, and it was Labor Day weekend, and I was sitting there and I thought, you know what? People need to see peace in scripture. Like, they need to read the word to see it and to be able to, digest it and know that God has given us more than 31 opportunities to connect with him through the word with peace, but they just don't know it. So I sat there and I went, you know how you look in your concordance, you look up peace, and I was like, Then God was like, yep. and, and I wrote down 31 different scriptures that had that talked about peace, and then from there it just came like that for 31 for the writing. So it's a scripture, something short that I've written about the scripture, and then space for you to write whatever your notes are about the passage from that day. And it just literally in 2 days it was done. But I sat on the book for 2 years.
Why?
Because I was afraid. I was afraid that people would think that the book was too passive in the world that we live in now. So this book came about like right around the time that Trump became the president. And I thought, nobody wants to read this when we have this crazy person, I'm sorry, but yeah, in the White House. And nobody, people aren't going to gravitate toward that. And then one day, a friend of mine who actually edited the book, she called me and she said, you wasted my time. And I said, what are you talking about? And she goes, I edited your book and you didn't do anything with it. You wasted my time. It is time for people to read this book. They need it. They need it. She said, I just went back and reread it and I needed it. Wow. Go back and read it. So I went back and just read the pages and I was like, oh my gosh, why am I sitting on this? And the rest is history. So the book is Inhale Peace, a 31-day journey to realign with God's peace. And day by day, people can read the scriptures and really connect on a daily journey with the peace of God, even reminding themselves, okay, today's scripture says such and such. All right, I can make it through this day.
Yes.
And that was the whole point, to literally, when I say a peace break is reconnecting with the peace of God, well, here is the peace of God through his word, right here in this book.
And I will be sure to link to the book and also that first episode of the podcast.
Okay.
People can really get the experience of and the lesson of really digging into those peace breaks. I was fortunate enough at that event that where Candance and I met to actually experience a live peace break with her, and it was amazing. And for all of the struggles or challenges that she says she continues to have, very similar to what she said to me, she resonated peace in the midst while she was teaching about the peace break. You could feel the peace resonating, like the energy. She has a very she's a large presence, but at the same time it's soft. And so I remember afterwards, because I went to the event with 3 other women. We drove down together. We talked about the peace in the middle of the event. So yes, I will definitely link to those resources for everyone to be able to take advantage of them. And so I want to know, with all that you've grown through, all that you have done, and all that you still have left to do, what would you say is your greatest accomplishment?
Outside of, having children and that kind of thing.
Listen, You know, I did an episode actually of this podcast about my greatest accomplishment to date. And I said that the fact that I've given up on everything that I've done at some point. I've never given up on motherhood.
Yeah.
15-year-old son. For 15 years, I have been his mother. There have been days where I might have said, I'm not going to eat cereal. You know, days where I might have went to the bathroom and locked the door and just let him do what he did. But I've never given up. And that, for me, is consistency. That is discipline. I have not done anything, you know,
Yes.
and there are days when I don't take a bath. So I can't even say every day I'm taking a bath or shower. I've never given up on being his mother. That consistency is my greatest accomplishment. So
yes.
is, you know, your response is your response.
Okay. But yeah, that's definitely up there. And I don't feel bad about the cereal anymore. Thank you so much for saying that. But I would actually have to say Cherishedflight in and of itself. Not, children and family aside,
Right.
actually taking this whole thing and shifting gears and really putting my all in all into Cherishedflight podcasting, when at the time it was not a big, like now everybody has a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
But at the time when I started this, there weren't very many people that had it, that were doing it. So I really, and I enjoy it. I enjoy working with Cherishedflight. I enjoy it. And even the book, something I always wanted to do.
Yeah.
I just think everything under the umbrella of Cherishedflight, I am immensely proud of. And I know there's so much, I've only scratched the surface. There's so much more to do, and not being afraid to say that I'm proud of it.
Yes.
Because, you put all this work into it, and then you're afraid to really toot your own horn. But I'm just very grateful that God has given me this opportunity to touch lives and to teach people. And, he's reaching through me to do it. And I'm just proud of it. I'm very proud of it.
That's awesome. And I think that, even that is a word, to be able to admit that sometimes we are challenged to say to ourselves, good job, to clap for ourselves, to make with the fact that we have accomplished something great. And it's okay to recognize that. It's okay to stop and take a peace break when you do accomplish something before you go on to the next thing.
Yes. And say to yourself, you know what? I did this. God did this. God did this. And I surrendered to it. I allow God to do it, and look at the results. And yeah, I'm proud. I'm proud.
That's right.
There's nothing wrong with saying that.
There is nothing wrong with saying that. That was a word for me as well.
Yes.
So I always share with my listeners the books that I'm reading, because I'm an avid reader. I believe that you have to read to lead, whether you're leading yourself or you're leading your home, your organization, someone on your job. So if you could recommend one book that is a must read beyond Cherishedflight and the Bible, it doesn't have to be your favorite book per se, but what is one book you would say is a must read, specifically for the woman who is on the journey from setback to impact, or building her courage to trust God and do what He called her to do?
Okay, and I just ran to get it. It's called The Emotionally Healthy Woman.
The Emotionally Healthy Woman. And who's that by?
Hold on, there's a subtitle.
Oh, okay.
8 Things You Have to Quit to Change Your Life.
And
I cannot pronounce her last name, but her first name is Jerry, spelled Geri. Last name is Scazzero.
bizarre.
And yes. And basically, in a nutshell, she was the first lady of a church, totally overwhelmed because she had the responsibility of raising the children she and her husband had. And one day she said, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm tired. And she actually changed her membership. She left the church. She left her husband's church and took a sabbatical. And in this book, she talks about the things you have to quit. Quit being afraid of what others think. Quit lying to yourself. Quit dying to the wrong things. Quit denying your anger, your sadness, and fear. Quit blaming. Quit over-functioning. Quit faulty thinking. And quit living someone else's life. When I tell you, she gets down into the roots, the nuts and bolts of her, like she's very transparent about the things that she did to create a false reality for herself and her marriage, and as an extension, as the first lady of this church, a false her and a false church. And when she stood up and said, no, I can't do this anymore, it changed the church, it changed her marriage, it changed her as a parent, her as an individual. She stopped giving, it changed everything. You got to read this book. It is an amazing read.
So I've not read this book. However, her husband has a podcast, Emotionally Healthy Leader.
Based off the same thing.
Yes, I've listened to some of his episodes, and he has made mention of the book. So now that it's coming around again, it will definitely be added to my to-read list. And I'll be sure to also link to that book in the comments as well.
Yes.
Sounds like a really, really good book. I mean, that's a courageous thing to say, you know what, I'm just not going to be the first lady right now. I'm done with that for now. That's good.
Yeah. And you can only imagine what happened after that. But it actually, that, like we've been talking about, that kind of break actually brought about healing.
Yes. I mean, talk about a forced Sabbath. Okay. And so before I let you go, I want you to share your definition of what it means when you hear she thrives, or for Candance to thrive. What does that mean?
That means that I am living authentically, living transparently, living with God's peace, and opening myself up to do exactly what God wants me to do without fear, without hesitation, with obedience. That's what she thrives means to me.
I love it. Well, so that our listeners can stay in touch with you, give them the tea on where they can find you in the internet streets.
Okay. On these internet streets. I like that. Yeah. So you can join me. You can join my Peace Collective. First, you can find my website. It's cherishedflight.com. I'm going to spell it out. CHERISHEDFLIGHT.com. So it's one word, Cherished Flight. I'm also on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, Cherished Flight. And also my podcast, you can find it on Apple Podcasts. You can find it on Spotify, Google Play, SoundCloud, everywhere you listen to podcasts, you can find. And it's called Cherishedflight the Podcast. So you can,
which is phenomenal.
Yes, it is.
You don't want to miss this experience. And I want to thank you, Candance, for your time, for what you've shared, for all of the jewels you've dropped. And I am exceedingly excited to have you the stage this fall.
Yes, and thank you for having me again. And I cannot wait to get to Pittsburgh.
Ooh, I hope that you really enjoyed this episode with Candance, and that you had your journal and you were taking notes on all of the jewels that she dropped. Fortunately for you, if you missed anything, you can always hit rewind and listen again. If you have not already, listen to this again. Leave a review. When you do, you are blessing another beacon who is in need of this community and a guide on their bounce back journey. Takes you about a moment, maybe two, to leave a review. If you don't feel like typing, we'll even take a rating. It is like 2 taps wherever you're listening, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, you already know. And of course, if you have not already, be sure that you grab your seat, RSVP, for Coffee and Clarity, Purpose Over Pandemics. It's going down Saturday, October 17th at 9 a.m. I promise you will be blessed by the experience. And before I let you go, of course, I need you to know that God is not going to play you. But if you are not aggressively seeking his peace, you are playing yourself. Be blessed.